Man, what a wonderful conversation. I'm not at all surprised. Mark talked a lot about aliveness. He was surprised that he talked so much about aliveness, but I love Mark's question, how do you support aliveness in students? Mark also insisted, and I agree with him, that a classroom is a sacred space. And what does that look like? And what does that mean for teachers? What role do teachers play there? And what impact might that have on students? These are things that we talk about that I hope you all listen for and find as fascinating and rich as I do. So let's get on with the interview.
When this started, I confess I did not understand. I guess maybe that's how it all turned out to be. Well, such a mess.
If you're new here, welcome. I'm Betsy Burris, a teacher educator and psycho coach. Every week, I podcast or write on Substack about using your emotions to feel better and teach better. Sometimes you'll hear stories of educators as told to me or sent into the Teaching Through Emotions hotline, all of them discussed with me and my co-host, Joe Johnson. And sometimes you'll hear an interview with someone who offers an interesting perspective on teaching and learning. We unpack it all here on the feed and on Substack. I'm so glad you're here. In today's episode, I talk with Mark Longhurst, a very inspiring pastor, a prolific writer, more on that in a minute, publications manager at Richard Rohr's Center for Action and Contemplation in Albuquerque, New Mexico, right? A mystic. Is it fair to say you're a mystic?
A mystic wannabe.
A mystic wannabe. That's good. That's better than so many. A mystic wannabe and a good friend. That's true. Mark, you're someone I confide in. I drink beer with. We watch and talk about movies, and I read you religiously in a secular way. So welcome to Teaching Through Emotions, Mark.
I'm thrilled to be here, Betsy.
Such a delight. I'm really psyched to ask you these questions because I'm convinced that teaching is a spiritual practice or a spiritual activity. It involves spirituality and faith, but I'd love to hear from you as an expert. So you have published a book called The Holy Ordinary, A Way to God. It's also a Substack, The Holy Ordinary, that you publish on a regular basis. What do you mean by the Holy Ordinary? And how can the ordinary possibly be holy?
No, thanks for that good question, Betsy. By the holy ordinary, really, I'm trying to make sense of the fact that I'm a very busy dude with kids and a job and a spouse, and yet I feel a deep longing and a passionate compulsion for the spiritual quest.
Mm.
And, even a generation ago, if you felt that really intense longing to be on a spiritual quest, people would become monks or nuns.
Yeah, you go
But
to a monastery.
but I think we're living in a really cool time because that's no longer the case. Monasteries and nunneries still exist, and they're fun to visit and do retreats, and they have their own vocation. But we're living in a time where so many people are discovering really the depths of spiritual traditions that have existed there, and the technologies of practices that help improve our lives and help us map out how to live. And people have charted how to feed that hunger, that longing in practical ways. So what I mean by holy ordinary is really just discovering that every single moment, whether it's extraordinary or just completely mundane, like cleaning up the tea I spilled at my desk this morning, has the possibility of, as a spiritual person, I'm going to use the word sacredness, of a transcendence, of a meaning that is ultimate over us in some way and larger than us, that calls us into something greater. That's how I can understand it in as non-religious way as possible.
Well, does one have to believe in God to seek the holy in the ordinary?
Well, I knew you were going to say that question, so that's why I set it up that way. No, I don't think you have to believe in God to experience a transcendent dimension, a depth of meaning in the ordinary, to experience a sense of awe and wonder, not only like at a sunset on the beach, but in your backyard, looking at a tree, or, I live by a brook, hearing just the ripple of the brook go by, or watching my dog chase after a rabbit. All of these are potential moments. All of our days are potential moments that are filled with capacity for transcendence and meaning and purpose. And the holy part is really just our ability to slow down and be present and meet that to the degree that that we are able.
Before I pressed record on this interview, you and I were talking about how stressed we are and how packed our days are and how it feels like, at least for me, I'm just running and skidding around. And I do really love the idea that that feeling of being stressed and the rushing that I'm doing from thing to thing and the way I feel when I'm doing a thing are all invitations for me to slow down and seek the holy in this moment, right? There's something for me anyway that makes so much sense that we as human organisms in a world that is at least we perceive as amazing, there's got to be part of our lives really must be about trying to forge a connection with the magic that we perceive, even just in the changing colors in the trees, right? Like we
Hmm.
all can say that's really beautiful, but why wouldn't we be thinking about that as a signal that there's something going on around us that we're part of and can take the time whenever we want to try to connect with as a means of, as you say, feeling better, living
Hmm.
better.
Yeah. Well, I love that you use that word connection because it really is slowing down enough to realize our interconnection with all creatures, all living beings, and each other. And yeah, I share that stress. I have a meditation practice. I sometimes experience my meditation practice as not like a gradual stop, as if I'm riding a bike, not a gradual break, slowly going down a hill, but rather as like an abrupt stop and I fly over the handlebars. Um, because I've been moving so fast in the day and I have not been present. I have not recognized the holy in the ordinary, in my tasks. I'm annoyed and grumpy or stressed and anxious. But the invitation is still there for us to return to a greater sense of presence, to not let the stress, anxiety, whatever take over, but to develop a relationship with it that this self body that I inhabit is bigger than that. And I get to be present too. And everybody's got their own ways of doing that. But for me, traditional contemplative practices such as meditation and like forms of prayer is how I try to structure my day so that I can stay connected.
Mm. Yeah, it's like touching
Yeah,
back to a holy place, to a
exactly.
place of calm. Huh. I mean, just talking about it makes me feel better, I have to say. Hearing you talk about it makes the stress kind of if I feel like it's leaving my body.
Hmm.
All right, well, so now you kind of have given some general examples, but I'd love to hear some examples from your book that you actually share. The book is I've read it, and it's lovely and so grounding and centering and lots of stories, and it's that kind of book where you talk a lot about yourself, your spiritual journey, and what it's like to be you, and how you've come to your thinking and practices about the holy in the ordinary. Can you share a couple stories about what it is to find the holy in the everyday life of, say, parenting? Because
Hmm.
I'm hoping people out there are parents and know that to be a parent is to voluntarily walk into hell sometimes. So, how do you find the ordinary, the holy in hell?
Well, yeah, it's the blend of heaven and hell, and
Yes.
it's total chaos. For me, there are two ways of responding to that. I do believe there's something holy about just flowing with the chaos.
Yeah.
I remember the early days of having kids. Our kids are, middle and still upper elementary, but I remember the early days of having kids when you're not sleeping and it's so stressful. Like psychologically, I'm at the total wit's end. I'm raging about just random things. And I'm sure I didn't do a lot of meditation. Maybe I did try, but it didn't really work. There's some circumstances in life where I just have to give myself over to the chaos. And that becomes its own type of surrender and way of being
Mm,
present to it, and that is holy even when I'm immersed in it. So I do believe we go through these phases where, we're in it. It might be a stressful work situation or phase. It might be a phase of life of parenting, but we're in it. And it's hard to develop that sense of witnessing and
mm,
presence of
mm.
slowing. And I think that's okay too. That's a season of life. I'm now in a season of life where parenting is still totally immersive and chaotic, but I do have a little more time to myself. If I wake up early, they're not getting up in the night to help them, or,
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
not wandering out of their bedrooms and you got to take them back, that kind of
yeah,
thing. So I
yeah.
can get up and I can, enjoy a quiet cup of coffee in the morning and do my morning prayer, and, or I can do a yoga practice or whatever. So yeah, I guess it's both and chaos and practices. I don't know if that got specific enough for you, but feel free to take
Well,
me where you would.
can I ask, when you're talking about this, it makes me think that maybe one of the important ways of thinking about kind of going with our flow, whether it's chaotic or, neat and tidy, the way we
Mhm.
might want it to be. When you talk about meditation, there is something about detachment. There's something about the observing, what in psychoanalytic field areas called like the observing ego. But
Mhm.
for people listening to this, thinking like, okay, just go with chaos, does that mean being able to detach enough, as you said, to witness it and maybe laugh at it and look at yourself and laugh at yourself? I mean, does detachment play a role here?
Yes, and is what I would say. For me, meditation is a letting go practice. It's a surrendering practice that helps me disidentify with all of the identities and junk
Mm,
that I want to say are me, but are not really me. And meditation helps me find that deeper self, what I would call the presence of Christ within. Listeners might call it something else, the Buddha self, just self. So there
mm,
is a
mm,
sense of detaching, and I view meditation as a helpful intervention each day, because everything coming at me, coming at us, asking me to define myself in ways that are less true than might be true of a bigger self. So,
mm,
I actually love working. But like, if I can be caught up in work and work too much, and then work becomes my identity, and then how I'm feeling is directly dependent on the feedback I'm getting and whether I'm performing well, or like whether I'm satisfied with what I did or whatever, or whether
right,
my boss
nice.
likes it, and so that's not my deeper self, my
Yeah,
deeper self
yeah.
is something more, or more than that. So how can I detach from the identities that are always trying to grab me and say, yes, this is you, you are the, and in a capitalist culture system, like, that happens all the time. Or even, I'm watching Alien Earth right now. I'm a guy who watches this show, we
Yeah,
do that all
yeah,
the time. This is
yeah.
this is my I'm really into movies or like sci-fi, but that's not my identity either. But then I also think that there's a quality of the heart, which is about surrender, that, you can do the practices or you can not do the practices, but there's a quality of heart surrendering into the chaos. If
Mm,
that is not there, then, we could be swallowed by the chaos, crushed by the chaos. For me, that meditation, those practices, whatever it is for listeners walking in the woods, it is really about just attuning to that quality of heart where I can be present and operate from that sense of being my deeper self,
yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, one way you're making me think is there's a certain detachment at one level, at kind of the superficial level or the level of daily life, in order to facilitate, I know this is a scary word for Buddhists, attachment or
Hmm.
connection. A connection with something that's more real and more profoundly, rooted and meaningful and true, which is
Hmm.
that some self inside you that is still and calm and good, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Don't we all want to be living from that deep connected place? You know when you've met somebody who's living from that place, and you know when you meet somebody who's not living from that place too.
I know it's so easy to tell and yet so hard to do, I think. Although maybe for you, for some it might be easier than for others. And this is the thing that would be so nice to get good at. So this leads us right into the next question, I think, really beautifully, that I'm, as you know, very interested in teachers and their tasks of helping to raise, new generations of people who might be able to be this kind of centered, rooted, enriched
Mhm,
person.
mhm,
And when you're describing yourself and, dealing with chaos and dealing with kids, I'm just thinking about teachers and all the chaos all around them all the time. I mean, they don't just have
mhm.
2 kids, they have 30 kids per class and they're all other people's kids. So the chaos that those kids bring individually and then the chaos that they co-create, just can be absolutely mind-blowing just to hear about it, let alone to be in the midst of it. And yet, you know, the scale of the work that a teacher has to do to stay centered, let's say, is much greater than what a parent needs to do necessarily. I mean, maybe it can be seen that way, but it's the same kind of work. And I assume you believe that it's possible to do this kind of centering work no matter where you are. What would you say, even though I know you're not technically a teacher, I do consider you a teacher. You are a writer, you are a manager of publications that teach all kinds of people about mysticism and contemplation and the value of these kinds of spiritual practices. So you are a teacher and you're a fantastic pastor. So you're not a classroom teacher, but what would you say about the task for teachers of finding the holy in the
Mm.
ordinary?
No, it's such a beautiful question. Before I launch into a response, I want to say this is aspirational. This is the quest of my life. And so I don't really think we get there. We don't get there, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
This is just a quest that I think invites us to a greater aliveness.
Yes.
And of course, teachers are invited to that greater quest of aliveness, as are students. And so I guess how I hear the question is both from the student and the teacher side. I'm trying to place myself in a classroom. I've had lots of friends like yourself who are teachers,
Mm-hmm.
and gosh, I just have nothing but the most complete respect and admiration for how you navigate the chaos, because there's so much energy, so much psychology, so much complexity that is in the room. And how does the teacher be present to all
Hmm.
that information and still teach? And I want to say that being present, it does matter. It doesn't have to be named, but there is a responsibility of the teacher to be managing their own emotions and their own quest, so to speak, so that the teacher can be present. So the way I would hear it is the authentic teacher is invited to a quest of aliveness to support the aliveness in her students. But then it also comes into how do you support the aliveness of the students? And that gets into all types of topics that I think you're probably more qualified to talk about, but like pedagogy,
Hmm.
because if part of my goal is to support the aliveness of the students, then I'm not just going to be, I don't want to just give them information that they're going to forget about after they take the test. I want them to be fully engaged people, and their realization is a part of my teaching outcomes, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
how do we do that? Gosh, it's pedagogical, it's psychical, it's contemplative, but that's at least how I initially hear the question.
I love that answer. I mean, you're making me think if the world is infused with what I really simplistically call magic or energy, life energy, then the way you're talking makes me think so is the classroom. The classroom is a microcosm of that world.
Yes. Yes.
Even if it doesn't have trees growing through the center, you can't keep it out. And thank God for students because they bring it in. They make sure that we can't keep it out. They bring themselves in. And so,
Mhm,
depending on the age, but I think all students can bring in raw life energy, raw love energy,
mhm,
well, no matter what their age is, and they can bring in their blocks to that energy. And so the thought that a teacher, I guess the way I think about teachers is as really crucial nodes in a living system, all connected. Everyone's connected, even if they don't know it or don't enact it or aren't invited to enact it. That potential of
mhm,
trying to harness that energy and maybe channel it. I'm thinking again of the teacher as a body, as an organism,
mhm,
as a living component that if grounded and centered and present, can actually be a channel. It can set up guardrails for the
mhm,
energy that the students bring. And I think you're
mhm,
totally right. It has everything to do. I would call it with instructional design,
mhm,
pedagogy. What are the actual guardrails you set up? What are the actual conditions that you set up in your classroom that will help channel your students' energy? And then for the stuff that flows over, that overflows where students have too much going on and they can't stay within the guardrails, then how do you bring yourself to bear
mhm,
through relationship, that's my thing, through your relationships with those students to help them direct themselves back to you and to each other, which is where the connection is, or to help them help direct them back to the content, which is also where connection can be, right? There are
Mhm.
endpoints here
Mhm.
that we're
Mhm.
talking about. And pedagogy should be pointing the students towards the content and towards each other and towards you. But if there's overflow, how are you going to use yourself to kind of help bring them back? Or certain students in the classroom. It's kind of a beautiful way of thinking about teaching. It's a
Mhm.
much more dimensional way,
Mhm.
seems to me.
Yeah. I was thinking about really, it's my understanding, the classroom is a sacred space. Listeners might put a different word on that, a space of meaning, a transcendent space of possibility. But really, I don't think the church has a corner on sacredness or sacred space. In my understanding in theology, if you go to a good church, it will remind you that the rest of our lives are sacred and full of sacred spaces. And so, of course, the classroom would be a space of great possibility and depth and meaning,
Mm.
and challenge, and where all of our wounds show up and all of our possibilities show up. So I love how you thought about that with instructional design and the necessary guardrails and pointing toward content. And gosh, I mean, I'm a big fan of Parker Palmer. I haven't read a lot of his work on teaching, but I know he does go in that direction of
Yep.
the educator as a spiritual practice, as a
Y-
spiritual teacher.
Guide. Yeah,
Guide.
exactly.
Yeah.
I think he gets it. And it's really amazing. I remember The Courage to Teach came out, it must have come out in the early 90s or something. I was in grad school at the time. I read that thing on an airplane and thought, "Oh, this is amazing." And so did millions of teachers. It was like a bestseller. So this topic of the holy in the ordinary, the sacredness of classrooms as sacred spaces, is not crazy. It certainly resonates with enough teachers that they, lifted Parker Palmer up into popularity. But I wonder, I'm really happy to be revisiting this with you because I really think especially in the face of so much trauma and
Mm.
that is in the students that come to the classroom, it's so much bad behavior and
Hmm.
which is backed up often by parents who I believe are also traumatized
Hmm.
and really limited and fearful and angry in an age when we have that kind of behavior, blaming
Yeah.
behavior, angry behavior, hateful behavior,
Hmm.
um, scapegoating behavior modeled for us at the very highest level of our country. This topic really needs to be revisited. Where do we find peace? And
Yeah.
and of course, the first place, really the only place is inside our own bodies, right? And then as a teacher, finding that peace and then figuring out a way to set up the conditions under which your students might be able to feel that might be able to settle down enough to feel your peace, because it radiates, as you said, those people early on, you said something about, people who are able to find this inner place. You know it when you see it
Hmm.
because you feel it from them, I think.
Yeah.
So for teachers to be that kind of person can be so helpful for kids, but also to set up the conditions under which the kids then get to function and interact with each other is really, really important so that we can try to counteract. This is asking a lot of teachers, but I don't see what else are you going to do? It's a microcosm of the world. It's a sacred space. Capitalize on that, make it so, and see what happens. If it'll make you feel better, it'll certainly make your students feel better, it seems to me. Unless what makes you feel better is just disconnecting and punishing. And in that case,
Yeah.
you've got work to do, right? You're very far from what we're talking about here.
Wouldn't we want the place where our kids are going every single day, except for weekends? Wouldn't we want the highest goals and aspirations for that space? And wouldn't we want to call forth people, human beings, to reach their most evolved selves as
Yes.
they show up in that space because it matters so much?
Totally. And I just want to add, I would like that to be true for all professional development, and all staff
Yes.
meetings as well. Like the adults should be doing it for each other. In fact, I would just say, th- I can't help but plug teacher support groups because I believe so strongly in them. That is what teacher support groups are too. They are sacred spaces. And I almost
Hmm.
talk about them that way. Like I talk about the membranes that surrounds us and keeps us safe in this place where we get to talk about hard things in ways that are going to make everyone feel better. There is a channeling of love and care. And I mean, genuine care and concern and love. It's just fantastic. And I think teachers really respond to it. Why wouldn't we want that to be happening in as many spaces as possible in our world? And certainly schools, easy, obvious thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
All right, I don't know if we're being redundant, but I'm just going to ask you, what do you imagine teaching would look or feel like for a teacher who's practicing the holy ordinary?
Hmm. Well, something about what you were just saying, I think it reminded me of, I'm going to say his name wrong, Resma Menakem.
My grandmother's hands.
Yeah. And in the treating of trauma, the impact that a settled body can have on people is profound.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
I was just thinking about that settled body. What does it
Yeah.
mean to be a settled body, even in a space where there is trauma and chaos and acting out happening? Gosh, I
Mm.
wish I could say, that's me, but it's probably not. But what kinds of practices do we need to be doing to cultivate people who can be, at least more often than not, settled bodies in the classrooms? And it goes back to what I was saying earlier. When we're operating from that larger self, we're going to be calling forth the best in the students. We're going to be present and responding to the information, not information that we're teaching, but the gathered information that's showing up by all those bodies,
Yeah, right on.
um, and more effective in our teaching, I would think.
I totally agree, and I think it is necessarily the vision that all teachers bring to their classrooms. Like, all I need to do is bring myself to the room. I mean, I've got a
Mm.
plan. I've got content that I love. I've got students that I care about. I've got relationships. But all I really need to do is bring myself to the room and be present and ready and just start the process and see what comes and make hay with whatever it is that I get, and realizing that that's what students really want and deserve, and often not having that can bring up the behaviors that turn classes into chaos because the students are picking up on, I think, on the disconnect, the person who's guiding them and themselves. Like, where are you? Are you here with me? Are you afraid of me? Are you trying to control me? Are
Yeah.
you afraid of the curriculum? Are you trying to control the curriculum because you're nervous about test scores? Whatever is pulling us out of our bodies, pulling us teachers out of
Hmm.
our bodies. I think our students, at least some of them, can pick up on that because they're used to picking up on those signals that indicate that they might not be safe, because those are signals they understand as unsafe, right? In other spaces. It's crazy how hard it is to be a teacher. If that's the trigger sensitivity of so many students to your state of being. Another reason why teachers need regular opportunities to just scour out the shit in their bodies so they can actually get still and get settled. It's beautiful. I love that. I
Hmm.
love that expression. And I'll look up, yeah, Resma Menachem. I'll look it up, and I will put his book. I think it's called My Grandmother's Hands.
My grandmother's
Um,
hands. Yep.
yeah, I'll put that in the show notes so people can check that out. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. He does a lot of work with police officers, I
He
think,
does. Yes, he
right?
does.
This is an unusual interview, eh? I mean, how often do teachers talk about the holy in their teaching? If you like what you're hearing and want to support others in finding teaching through emotions, please leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. If you don't feel like writing, even just a rating will help. And share this episode with a friend. The work teachers do is life-changing, sometimes life-saving. And while it can feel great for a student, it can take a toll on the teacher. Let your teacher friends know about TTE so they can feel supported and cared for, so they can feel the love that Mark and I have been talking about. Thanks for listening. So, you haven't mentioned this yet, but I do wonder about this question. What about faith? I mean, what's the relationship of faith to the holy and to what you're talking about? Is it different? Is it something else? And follow up, what does faith have to do with teaching from your point of view?
For me, this is all tied to a tradition and a lineage, and I find great meaning in that. And what that does for me, folks are going to come from their own traditions or not, or humanist traditions or no traditions, and perhaps find an equivalent. But what that does for me is it places love at the center. I really think that my tradition, Christianity, boiled down to it, is about love and showing up in the world in compassion and liberatory ways. And so I draw on the resources of my tradition, the practices, the history, the texts, the communities, to inspire that greater vision of love, because I need all the inspiration I can get. And what I like about that is I'm joining a tradition of faith. I'm not making it up on my own. I'm not
Mm.
alone.
Mm.
And I'm surrounded by, a word in the Bible is a great cloud of witnesses. There are
Mm.
ancestors that have gone before me that have walked on this path of love and transformation. and they've done it, and I
Mm,
get to learn a little bit from their mistakes. There's a lot of people who made mistakes in the Bible, and
mm.
I think if we read it like people making mistakes rather than and even God making mistakes, I think it opens up the Bible for us a little more as we evolve towards love. And so that faith through tradition, through text, through community, helps me do that.
When you said love, tears started coming to my eyes because I think I totally appreciate your embracing all traditions and not traditions, no traditions, because while it's kind of lovely to think that you have a set of elders whose experiences you value and can trust in the Bible and elsewhere, a lot of people don't. I include myself in that group. And yet I absolutely believe that love is at the center of it all. And so, yeah, I don't really care. To me, it's like, well, isn't every tradition basically boiled down to that? Every religious tradition, I don't know enough about it, but I can imagine that it is true for most, if not all, religious traditions. But it's definitely true for me, and I think it's true for lots of teachers. I think they would say at the
Mhm,
center of their practice is love, and if it's not love, it's care. And
mhm,
yet, I do think that it's hard for anybody to be clear on, for me anyway, the role of love and what it means about faith. That is, if love allows me to believe in people and no matter how they behave, that is a form of faith. I think that's what you're getting at. And love is complicated because it doesn't mean what we think it means all the time. It doesn't mean I'm going to rush in and fix your problems, rush in and help you learn how not to do what it is you need to know how to do in order to solve in order to live your life, right? So love and care, I think, can be really misunderstood. I mean,
mhm,
probably in the worlds of pastors and other religious figures, definitely in the worlds of teachers, definitely in the worlds of parents. These are the two
mhm.
worlds I know, where we think that jumping over our what I call our garden walls, our boundaries into other people's gardens and fussing around in there and trying to make them better because what because we're better at it or we're terrified. That's not care. That's actually disrespectful. So this question of love isn't so easy as, yeah, I love my kids. I love them.
Mhm,
That's wonderful, but it's so much more. And I think that these words that we're kind of bandying about, holy, sacred, faith, love, they're circumscribing or defining a space that
mhm.
isn't obvious. How to occupy it is not obvious. It does
Yes,
require
yes,
introspection and reflection and
yes.
meditation or whatever, and prayer or whatever, and pretty honest, like heavy honesty about ourselves
Mm,
and our relationships and the roles we play there, and curiosity about other people, the people at the other end of our relationships. Like, what are they teaching us about themselves? And being open to that.
yeah. I'm thinking about this author named she's a preacher and author activist named Jackie Lewis. She's got a book called Fierce Love, and she talks about love as unconditional regard for the difference of the other.
Mm.
And that can be fierce. And it also means allowing the person in front of me to be who they are. And unfortunately, Christianity
Yeah.
has such an imperial,
Mm.
um, abusive track record of just doing the exact opposite of love,
Yep.
and
Yep.
calling it love.
Yep. Yeah, there's another example of how fucked up we can be about definitions of love. Like,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
not what you think it is or what some
Crush it.
think it is.
Yeah, crushing difference, scapegoating marginalized people, the most vulnerable. Our churches do it, our country is doing it, but I do view that as a posture of faith to be on a quest of greater love. And
Yeah.
I think we can all define our traditions in different ways. For me, it's the more formal tradition, but for others listening, the ancestors that inspire you in faith, calling forth towards love, might be something totally different. It might be writers, speakers, teachers, family members, mentors that folks have learned from. And sacred texts, it might not be traditional religious sacred texts.
Yeah.
They might be other texts that have changed your life in that way that leads you towards loving. And communities might not be church communities, but they might be teacher support groups
Right on.
or just the folks you go out for a beer with on Friday night or whatever. So I think all of that helps cultivate the conditions of faith and love, not
Mm.
in the sense of a creedal faith or a particular religious faith, but in a more universal way.
I love it. It's more emergent. It's emergent from the conditions as opposed to imposed and mandated, right? That it's
Hmm.
lovely to think of faith as being something that actually emerges from the interactions of people with each other, that faith and love and trust and the holy are emergent properties. Certainly, we bring our settledness wherever we go if we're doing the work, but there is something about being together in community out of which emerges even the experienced reality of these things that religious traditions are trying to codify, right? I just want to throw out that when you mentioned Jackie Lewis, and again, I'll put this in the show notes so people can access this book, Fierce Love. I'm guessing it's unconditional positive regard for the difference of the other.
Yes.
Unconditional positive regard, that is a notion that, as far as I know, Carl Rogers originated. He is a
Oh, yes, she's
psychoanalyst. He was a
taking it.
yeah,
Yes.
yep. And it's a really interesting and valuable concept, stance towards other people. She's just extending it by saying unconditional positive regard is the large idea, but let's be specific.
Hmm.
You can really use it in terms of difference. That's
Hmm.
what Carl Rogers was assuming everyone understood, but apparently we have to make that more explicit. So I just love it that I'm gathering a pastoral, a religious, spiritual person who's pulling from the field I love so much, which is psychoanalytic theory and
Yes.
practice. Right
Yeah. Oh,
on.
thanks for calling that out. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, well, I just contextualizing it because it's
Yep.
a great concept. Okay, so here's a question that might be interesting. What are the risks of letting the holy live in the classroom? What are the risks? What would keep someone from wanting to do it?
Well, it's not very controllable.
Yeah.
So it requires a surrender of the teacher and the students to be brought to a place that they do not know where they are going yet. The content might still be the same, but it won't be the same because the unique context of the classroom will contribute to going to a new place. That unconditional positive regard for difference will build a teaching community, and each person has a unique role to play in that. I mean, I could apply that to church congregational work too.
I love that. I love it. What you're pointing out to me is a couple things. One is, so our classroom should probably embrace different opinions, right? That would mean, this is something that the far right is very concerned about and attacking universities about. Like, you're so lefty. Well,
Hmm.
yeah, you know what? There is definitely, I think, a progressive left-leaning attitude towards knowledge and thinking that I know I embody, but as a teacher, I have to allow different opinions so that we can all engage with them. And the other thing I wanted to say is you're making me think that for me, education is about relationships. It's the lines between things. It's the lines between people. It's the lines between people and content. And in this case, the lines between me, a lefty, and you, a righty. And if there's some way that the two of us can forge a connection that allows us to hear each other and have unconditional positive regard for each other at the same time, which does not mean we have to cave to each other, agree with each other,
Hmm.
just be super, super nice with each other, but actually engage in ways that are trusting, that are faith-based. Like, I can love you while I'm disagreeing with you. And that means I can stay connected with you and listen to. I think it was Carl Rogers who also came up with active listening,
Oh, interesting.
right?
Yeah.
So it's fascinating to hear you talk about the fact that the holy in the classroom would mean that we have to allow for what is not controllable, and we have to allow for the unpredictable co-construction of a shared reality based on relationships among the people in the room and with the content in the room and the content that people bring to the room, like different opinions. And that is what education should be about, is figuring out
Hmm.
how to manage all that and how to survive it and how to grow and learn from it. Like, oh my God, I love it. And that is not controllable. And so, of course, teachers should be terrified walking into a classroom thinking that they're going to allow human beings to be.
Yes, because the teacher will be changed, as will the students.
And that happens
But
every day, all day, day after day after day.
yeah,
Wow.
and that's scary. It's scary, And so you understand why people in all kinds of professions choose the path of less aliveness because it is an invitation to be alive. And
Yeah,
not
yeah.
all of us are ready for that.
Yeah, well, it's because it's so unpredictable and it's so full. There's so much feeling, there's so much energy. Like, oh my God, what do we do when we're overflowing? Ah, so many people just, troll or post nasty, nasty comments. Very interesting. I love it. I love it. Well, maybe we should take the time to be explicit What would you say the benefits? I think we've absolutely been alluding to this, but I want to give you a chance to say it succinctly. What are the benefits of seeking the holy in the classroom?
Well, I guess I would just say the benefit, apply it to the rest of life. The benefits of seeking the holy anywhere are that reality is reality. And my faith tradition tells me it's a loving reality. So becoming present to that loving reality means that I get to participate in it and that I get to receive it. It's a gift, and
Mm-hmm.
I get to be present to it. I've been using the word aliveness a lot in this conversation for some reason, but that's resonating with me right now. It means
Yeah,
I get to
I
be
love it.
alive to it.
Yeah.
And so if I was a teacher, I'd want that in the classroom, but I want that in also in my work, and I want that in my former work as a clergy person.
I want it in my friendships.
Yeah, in
I
our
want it in my
family life,
family.
of
Yep.
course.
Yep.
Such aliveness, it means going to the hard places, going to the wounded places, the conflict places.
Yeah.
Conflict is alive.
Yes. Yes.
Shutting
Yes.
down conflict is not alive.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so this is not bypassing anything, but
Nice.
it is really just a way of being present to what life is.
Yeah. I love it. I'm sorry I didn't pick up on this earlier, and I'm glad you said it again, but the woundedness. The
Yes.
fact that it's not just students who bring their wounds into the classroom, teachers bring their wounds into the classroom.
Of
And
course.
it's a rare human being who isn't wounded in some way. And to think that this opportunity of a school day to be among people who are part of this reality, whether one can believe it's loving or not, to be recognizing that the people that comprise this classroom are wounded in ways that some of them are teaching us about. Not all of them are, but some of them are. I call those kids the gifts, the
Hmm.
ones who are acting out, and possibly revealing for the teachers their own woundedness. Now, if you're going to deny that you have wounds as a teacher, then you're doing everyone a disservice because you're going to act out your wounds too, just like your students are. But to realize that we are all wounded and therefore all kind of in the same boat, and that as a teacher, you have the capacity to love your
Hmm.
students through their pain.
Hmm.
I would say, again, in the case of teacher support groups, teachers have the opportunity to be loved through their pain in these groups. To me, it's an infinite regress. Everybody needs a
Hmm.
place like this to go to, and some go to church for it.
Yep.
Fewer now
Yep.
than ever before, but there have got to be places for people to go to feel the loved. If they can't receive it in the classroom, if they deplete themselves by giving it in the classroom and being completely out, they're done. There's got to be a place for teachers to go where they can be loved. As I put it, fuck self-care. Get cared for. Right?
Yes.
We need places to
Yes.
go where we can be
Yes.
replenished and we can be reminded love
Absolutely.
is there. And my wounds, they're not too much for anybody. They're not too much for
Hmm.
these people. They're not too
Hmm.
much. And so that my students' wounds aren't too much for me. I
That's
don't know
beautiful.
how else to think about being alive to each other, if not with the awareness that woundedness is we're all the walking wounded. And what are we going to do about that? What are we going to do for each other? What are we going to do for ourselves?
Hmm.
Boy, just being human is a big old task.
Oh yeah, we need all the help and care from others that we can,
That we can
and
get.
people need our care, but not our burned out care, which doesn't work, as you said. That was
Exactly.
beautifully put.
Oh, I wish I remember what I just said. But just moving on to the next thing. So, Mark, is there anything else I should have asked but didn't?
No, these are great questions. Loved it.
It's really, really fun to talk to you about this. I feel like there's so much more to say, and maybe I'll, as time goes on, we'll just have another chat sometime in the future because
Sure.
it's a huge topic. It's a huge topic, and it's your life, and well, I love you so, and
Oh,
I
thank you,
trust
Betsy.
you
Love
so.
you too.
If listeners want to connect with you, how would you have them do that?
I write a weekly Substack, marklonghurst.substack.com. Sometimes it's about the quest for the holy in the ordinary, but I also do random things like movie reviews, and I've got another part of the Substack that is going through a very challenging part of the Bible, and I'm passionate about apocalypticism. I love zombie thrillers and all the things. And I'm also passionate about taking what have been used as texts of abuse and terror to be used for love and liberation. So that's what I'm up to on Substack, and yeah,
Dot
marklonghurst.substack.com.
Substack. I do want to put in a plug for this Substack. I read it all the time. The Book of Revelations, the stuff that Mark says about it is, you don't know it. You don't know it. If you think you know what he's writing about, you cannot predict. And it's really fun. It's really great to read them. And
thank you,
all
Betsy.
the other wisdom that you share. I love it. I just want to thank you so much for taking the time. It's really great to see you, even if just online.
Yeah, I know. We're just down the road, but gosh, it's so good to be here with you. Thank you for taking the time to ask such good questions.
Thank you for taking the time to give me such good answers. I hope the listeners love them as much as I do.
Yeah, good. Love you, Betsy.
Love you, Mark. Thank you, as always, for listening. TTE is a Podvision production, created and hosted by me, Betsy Burris, and co-hosted by Joe Johnson. Production and audience development support from Julian Androkaya and Andrea Koskay. Crucial editing by Brad Wells. And the music, which makes me smile and dance every time I hear it, by Tom Burris of Jabbering Trout. Thanks one and all. If you like this episode, text it to a friend. And if you haven't already, sign up for my Substack, where you can become a paid subscriber and get all kinds of goodies, including exclusive podcast episodes that will change your life. That's teachingthroughemotions.com. Thank you for listening.
It's all true.